What is up, fellow sickos? Per the screen, I am the certified fantabulous Grant Hughes, and I am joined by my shit stain of a co-host, Dan Favali. We're here for our sophomore. We haven't done a stock report on sophomores this year. We did some rookie stuff, and they're always going to come up with awards. There's no award for a sophomore, which I'd be open to there being like sophomore of the year award, by the way, Dan. But we're just here with a stock report. We'll give our verdicts, stock up, stock down. But first and foremost, the most important question, and you don't get asked, you don't get asked this nearly enough to open the show. Dan, how are you doing?
Well, here's the problem. I feel like you've really overstepped because it's my job if I'm Dan today, which the handle at the bottom of the screen says I am, to ask you how you're doing. And then it's incumbent on you to try to come up with something interesting or pithy or vampy so that you, meaning me, who's you, can like do whatever I need to do to prep the next section of the pod. So how's it feel?
How's what feel?
Being asked how you're doing.
So here's how I'm doing. Now I have to give you the anecdote that you would normally give me. I have a gym complaint. Let's open up with this. I'm all for people going to the gym. I love being at the gym. And I understand, like, when you go to a commercial gym, you have to, be swift with, all right, I have to change my plans. You can't get married to a machine unless you're going to go at, like, psychotic times, like 4 a.m. I don't like when people come up to me when it's busy, and I'm always very nice, and I'll let people work in. But, like, if I'm mid-rep in my set, like, that's probably not the time to ask if you can use my machine. Like, when I'm in the middle of pushing. And like, I'm not lifting, it's me. So I'm not like, benching or like using a machine benching like 300 plus pounds. But like the amount of times where it's like people have come up and like I'm in the middle of like a set and they're like tapping me on the shoulder and my headphones are in too. Just a tiny complaint. There's the whole, I know people get frustrated around January, new year, new me, influx of enrollees, but it's become I just don't get it.
That feels like a pretty basic etiquette thing. Like, even if it's your first day on January 2nd or whatever, it feels like you should just know not to, like, take 30 more seconds and wait for the person. I mean, like, that's a valid complaint that you're making.
And it's also, the reason I'm okay saying it is because the people who are doing it look exactly like you would expect them to look. Like, they're not the first time people at the gym, because I think those people are probably, for the most part, they're going to overthink things and like give it more forethought than people who just assume that their workout, their lift is more important than yours because of whatever goal they might have in mind. So make of that what you will. But these people, for generally speaking, look and are wearing exactly what you would expect them to look and wear.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're being bullied and you should lodge a complaint.
I am. I'm going to go to the gym desk in Tattletown. They came up and I was mid-set and they were like, are you done yet? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. The weather, finally, like, I don't really have an anecdote. I enjoyed yours. The weather's good now. Like, the sun has been out. We're going to get some 70-degree days. Spring training has started, which is always like, it coincides with the weather. And that just like my mood I don't think I have seasonal affective disorder, but like when the sun starts to finally come out, like towards the end of February, I really do like get a spike in mood that kind of persists like through August. So I don't know. I think I'm an undiagnosed seasonal affective disorder sufferer that is really on the upswing right now.
Which is funny because I have a scouting report of you as a co-host in my Google spreadsheet. It's like, Grant, excellent to podcast with, late February through early August.
Yeah, we all have our hot and cold months. So you just got to catch me at the right time.
I should have known the weather was turning when you logged on and didn't look absolutely miserable to be here.
Well, we got natural light coming through the window behind me. That's a huge, hasn't been the case for like months. I love it.
The rookie stock report though, the sophomore stock report though, Grant, how do you evaluate sophomores? Like, when you're looking at, am I investing more stock in them, or like, are stock up, stock down? Like, what is your approach when the baseline is just that 1 year of basketball we've seen?
Yeah, I definitely found myself trying a little harder, because with rookies, if we're, how do they look 3 months into their careers or whatever, we almost just stop ourselves and say, like, it's too early to decide almost anything. And I wanted to do it differently with sophomores because we have a full year and now, over half of a second. And I still caught myself like just being way too declarative, like, oh, this guy's never going to do X, or because this guy can't do Y right now, his ceiling is here. Like, I definitely still fall into that. So I think the thing to remember here for listeners and really talking to ourselves is that it's still, some of these guys are like 20, some just turned 21. It's still possible that they surprise us with growth trajectories that are just like not even remotely foreseeable right now. At the same time, I think we do need to like flag some stuff if there are certain deficiencies or certain like things guys are excelling at. But I'm going to try really hard to keep in mind that this is still less than 2 years of experience and we can't like shut the door on certain things, even though I know I'm going to slip into that.
And it tends to be more of a, because the way we're going to structure this is there's like a handful of sophomores that we just really wanted to zero in on, and then we'll go through like some other briefer ones, but it tends to be on the ones that you're focusing on for the most part. It feels like more of a positive exercise. And this is also for me, it's, how Brian Windhorst calls it, that first max, the fun max. These are like the fun evaluations, because I feel like for rookie and sophomores, you have the license to just really focus on the eye test or like the vibes or what you actually think, rather than, like he's only shooting 39% on floaters, but I still believe in it. And you can't really do that with someone who's been in the league for like 4 or 5 years.
Totally. You're still talking about, it's just like draft evaluations where it's like, you get numbers here and you get eye tests there, and you can just get away with caring about the eye test more the younger a player is.
We begin with probably the worst sophomore of this class, Victor Wembanyama. He will not be playing again this season, though. That's a bummer because of deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder, which, just to echo, the Spurs believe that this is a one-off thing, and here's hoping. I don't have anything to add about his defense, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. He's like equal parts just disruptor, deterrent, runaway defensive player of the year. I will say, before kind of getting into what I've noticed on offense from him this year, did you kind of see, Grant, in the aftermath of now we know he's not going to be eligible to win defensive player of the year, there was some pretzel twisting or just questionable framing of he never deserved to win it. Like, this is just the media pushing, look at where the Spurs rank defensively in points allowed per possession. I'm just like, I don't know how you watch watch Victor Wembanyama and think he's only his blocks on the defense.
Yeah. He's absolutely, what if he were only his blocks? Even then he's still better at that than anybody. And it's not like they're empty, because you can cite all the other stats of like field goal percentage, defense at the rim. The thing that gets tricky, I think, and maybe this is where that pushback came from, is like, unless you're really watching every possession, you don't get the sense of like just how much he deters, like how many reconsiderations he forces, like how many types of shots just are no longer like allowed to take place just because he's there. Like there's probably some catch-all thing that covers that somewhere. But like, I really do think you're not like, this is, man, what did it take like a minute into this to get real high and mighty? But like, you're just not paying attention if you think he's just his blocks. Like that's pretty straightforward.
That's a hot take.
Yeah.
But I agree with it. The offense, I think he's made a lot of strides there. And I think if you dig into something like the fact that he increased his rim finishing from 70% to 76% is just stupid. I mean, he's 7'4", 7'3", whatever, 7'8" at this point, whatever. Same height as Big Bird, I think, right? Isn't he 7'8"? That is just, it's incredible. You look at his pull-up efficiency, that is actually down from last year, but he's increased his efficiency on above the break threes and mid-range shots in general. And so when you're just looking at all jumpers, last year, his effective field goal percentage, which for anyone who might not know, that measures 2 and 3 point efficiency together. So his effective field goal percentage on all jumpers last year as a rookie, 43.3. As a sophomore, that's up to 49.2. So that's kind of just a pretty big increase. And I think some people will always have a problem with his shot selection or the fact that maybe he's not operating in the interior more. I don't. I think that this is someone who, for the most part, is just like a 7.5-foot wing, basically. But to that end, I mentioned the rim finishing has gotten better. I think the screening from him has gotten better. And it's not like maybe there is aesthetically, it doesn't look like there's this exponential increase in strength, but the fact that he's able to do that when his frame is not really like kind of the separation he can create or not being afraid to connect on these screens, I think that's gotten better from him. And I honestly think maybe where I feel where he's shown the most improvement, and I'm curious if you agree, is just the quality of his passes. And that might be the game that I feel like the part of his game that flies under the radar the most. He is more poised in traffic. He's more deliberate when he's getting ball screens and coming around them. It feels like, or it doesn't feel like, I would argue that he definitely does have better circular vision of the entire floor when he's in the middle of it or when he's at a standstill than he did last year. Just a lot more smarter live dribble passes. Feels like maybe he's not trying the more bombastic ones, which is fine, but like he can still throw those. The turnovers are down. The turnover percentage is down. He can still sort of dribble just like or spin right into the help, and that's how he'll get a lot of his turnovers. I think that could potentially always be a quote unquote issue for him, just because I've compared it to this. He is so tall. It's like me or you trying to dribble a tennis ball. So it's just like, so the size of the ball might be off for him, but then also just the distance it needs to travel from the floor to his, let's say his waist. It's just like, it's so ridiculous that there's always maybe going to be some turnover issues there. But I think ultimately the fact that he feels more well-rounded offensively is like a really big deal. And I'll close here. He is just worth any sort of adjective that you think is too hyperbolic for Victor Wembanyama and his future is just not.
Do you think so? Part of the appeal of Chris Paul being there this year was that, well, okay, Wembanyama is going to get however many spoon-fed lobs, or like things will just be simpler for him. This is, to me, like, would you agree that among the many, bummers of not seeing him down the stretch of this year is like, well, what does he look like with a point guard like Fox that isn't just the like every single walk it up, like run the play, like that is, more of a cuts off the ball, like really played off Sabonis in some of their best sets, like really kind of empowered the big to be more of a facilitator. Like, do you think that ultimately Wembanyama is going to be that type? Like, I guess you can't be everything, but it looks like he's definitely just a floor stretcher that's going to mess defenses up because he's going to shoot 10 threes a game or whatever and have to be guarded by a big. But do you see enough of the passing development you're talking about to envision him as like someone that's getting it at the elbow and is like, dumping it down, or like having guards run off of him, or like playing that kind of role too? Because the height there, we see Jokic use it to his advantage. You have passing angles that other guys don't, just because you're over the top of everything. Do you think that might be part of his game based on this year?
I don't know if it's ever going to me. I don't know if it's going to be a huge part. I wonder if he was surrounded by maybe better spacing in general, would that be something that they kind of featured him more of? I guess he's capable of doing it. Would you worry though about if you're going to use him kind of like Jokic and he's not built like Jokic to have like that same, let's say, strength level or girth or whatever? Is that something you even want to see him doing in like high volume?
Yeah, I think probably not as like a first choice. I think your first choice is you do just treat him like a wing that sort of always is guarded by a mismatch, because you put a conventional big on him, and in space, I think that's a tough ask as he gets, quicker and stronger. But like, I think you really could station him closer to the basket, and like, maybe it's I guess that's all just to say that like, we saw one new dimension of like, okay, I'm pretty sure he can just be a high volume 3-point threat. But I don't feel like that's like, oh, that's definitely what he's going to be offensively going forward. I think like that can be it, but I still think what he showed this year, I agree, the passing vision is like, it's legit. It might just be something where, depending on the matchup, he can be the most devastating spacer or the most devastating elbow hub, or like, you name it. I think the options have only broadened, I think, as he's, I guess, concluded his second year.
What would be interesting there too, and I was just looking, he does rate better in the post this year than he did last year, but it's just still not like a monster part of his game. And he's, by the way, the big thing, and I like, because I focus on the jump shot stuff, like his self-created shot making efficiency is just way higher than it was last year too. But what's interesting is, could you envision him being, and like this might be a better, when you're looking at the body type comp, of how we saw Porzingis more so, like sometimes in Boston, but a lot of the times in Washington, like maybe he's not, I think he's a better passer than Porzingis, so you could do that, but like you're stationing him higher up where maybe it's less physical. And like, if he's just someone who can catch it, turn around, and like, just, I mean, he can definitely shoot over anybody. That might, if you're looking for more, it's not even traditional stuff, but if you're looking for more just kind of those block-ish touches, that might be a way to figure to use him there.
And I think like two things that I believe will come for him are like Porzingis is lean, but like he's got a strong base. Like he's harder to move. And the other thing is his foul drawing craft for a big guy is like way up there, because that's one of the keys to Porzingis's mismatch domination is he just like the second he feels the hand on the arm, he rips through and goes up, and he's drawing free throws on like what would be 13-foot shot attempts. Like Wemby can absolutely add both of those things. So yeah, I could see that if you don't want him to get beat up. The one thing I don't want really for him is like you're dumping it into him on the block. Like that's the least interesting way to use him.
And do you, because you mentioned free throws, does it worry you at all that like he's just not generating a ton for someone his size, where his free throw attempt rate has actually dropped precipitously compared to last year? I don't want to say I don't care. Like that's something that, but if he's drawing a ton of fouls, you would want it to be like kind of in the vein of a Kevin Durant or the way that Porzingis would do it, rather than post ups or like these bulldozing drives where he's banging into to everybody.
Well, he too, like normally you would encourage every player to like seek contact, but he has such unique physical advantages that like he can actually, you could justify telling him avoid it, but like use your quickness and use your length to just get angles that no one can cover, as opposed to like, well, if you just bang into somebody, are you really like leveraging any of the things that you're great at? I don't know. Eventually, maybe, but right now, I think I'm not bothered at all by the free throw stuff. He makes his free throws. That's something. He's really good at that.
All right, so I have a really tough question for you here.
Sure.
I'm just going to take a deep breath before I ask it. Stock up or stock down for Victor Wembanyama?
This will be controversial. I'm going to say stock up. I think he's looking pretty good.
Same here. Is there any justification behind saying stock down? Because is this someone who's always going to be dealing with something? And I don't want to answer my own question, but the fact that it's this, not that a blood clot is better, but it wasn't, sore left knee or something, is I don't really think that at least right now, you can't you can't assign value to him missing the rest of this season with the deep vein thrombosis in his shoulder.
No, it'd be like the same thing as saying like, because Brandon Ingram had it once, we're really, Brandon Ingram's had other injuries, but it's like, it just isn't the same. Like if he'd had like a foot sprain, like anything with the feet or the knees or the back, that's a problem. But he played 71 games last year. He was really durable this year. I got no concerns on that front.
And I guess it did look like he was hitting a wall leading into the All-Star break, but now we know why.
Right.
Only 33 minutes per game. That was the other. Like, well, is he ever going to let him? When is he going to play 30 plus this year? That's what he did.
Now.
This is your guy.
Yeah.
Literally.
I mean, I love it. So I think we have to just address, like, it's been 15 games this year. So the small sample thing applies to everything we'll say about Chet Holmgren. I think that even knowing that, the way I would frame it is like, if you just went down the list of, okay, what would we like to see from this guy in his asterisk sophomore season? Cause he did miss his full, what should have been his rookie year. And I guess what you might say is like, the top thing we'd like to see is availability, and we have not gotten that. So that's 2 out of 3 years that have been compromised by injury. That's a concern, obviously. I don't really know what to do with that other than to just say that's a thing, and I guess you price that in. But beyond that, you'd say, well, all right, so on this team in particular and going forward, love to see increased stretch. Like that is just where he's going to be most effective as like an offensive component. His 3-point percentage is up. From 37 to 39%. You'd say, well, I'd like to see a little more rebounding, especially on the Thunder team. Rebound rates up, block rates up, like all in fewer minutes per game, free throw rate up. Like he's doing it again, 15 games. So like a shitty 3-game stretch could change all that. But just based on what we've got so far, I think he's basically just checking all the boxes of what you would have hoped statistically and from like a role perspective to see. So I just think like, the question is, and we're going to address it on Friday, it's really hard for me I want you to appreciate what this means. Me saying it is like deciding between who's more important to the Thunder's big picture plans. Is it him or is it Jalen Williams? And like, I think Jalen Williams is great, but Chet.
Do you? Do you?
Did you know that? Should we talk about Jalen Williams for like a tight half hour? Would you
Yeah.
want to just to like set a baseline?
A tight half hour.
Yeah, no, I don't really know what else to add because the small sample stuff really compromises it. But I think Holmgren has picked up where he left off last year, where he was like one of the 5 best defensive players in the league and just showed the potential to be this hugely valuable offensive, like kind of secondary option with, again, like we talked about this over the offseason, like he added a lot more off the dribble stuff over the course of last season. We've seen some of it this year. I just think he's right on track for what you would have wanted if you're an optimistic Thunder fan. I don't really have, I don't know what the negatives are other than the obvious of like, oh man, can he please stay on the floor?
Which that's a big deal when we're talking about like 2 of 3 years of there being struggles there. This isn't me calling you out, but I found what you said interesting. We worked on a project together for Bleacher Report. And when I was reading what you had written, yeah, you kind of just, I don't want to say you casually threw it in there, but you said Chet Holmgren is already a better defender than Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
Can you just get into that a little bit more?
Well, so I think the block rate stuff and the rim defense stuff, I think, again, we're dealing with small samples. Like it's close enough that you can say like, yeah, all right, in terms of rim protection, sure. If you're talking about mobility, like I think you got to give that to Chet too. And you're not really asking either of them to defend on the perimeter a ton. You got to concede that Chet is just more mobile still at this stage. And then if it's like, I think I was making that argument in terms of just like who's a better player flat out. And it's like, well, if you're going to talk about offense, then we're done with the conversation because Chet has like real offensive dimensions. But I do think, some of the advanced metrics like DEPM, again, that's small samples. Chet's right there at or above Rudy. I don't have the numbers in front of me. But I think you can make that case pretty comfortably. Probably wasn't true last year, although I think the numbers might have been closer last year than you'd want to admit if you're big on Gobert. But yeah, I think given the age difference, given the mobility difference, given the fairly negligible rim protection stuff, like I think Chet right now, I would put it this way. If he had played enough to qualify, it's hard for me to imagine we wouldn't have him right smack in the middle of like the Mobley, Jaren Jackson, who's DPOY actually now that Wemby's out. He might even be the guy I'd pick first.
Well, he would have won if Wemby got in because just the Thunder have an all-time great defense. And if he had qualified, it would have gone to him.
Right.
I think that's how voters would have looked at it. Not that I don't know what to make of his offense. I want to make that clear. What is the thing that needs to happen more if he's like, because I find myself, the drive rate is about the same compared to last year. The 3-point attempt, like the number of 3-point attempts per minute, I think it's actually lower than last year, about the same as last year. I'm still trying to figure out like what his calling card is going to be on the offensive end, which I think is mission critical if you're trying to view him as, let's not even say a hub, because I don't envision Oklahoma City really ever using him like in the, let's go into the half court, let's throw the ball down low to Chet, but just more so that if he's going to be a secondary driver of offense, I think the thing for me is, one, would I like to see him take threes and more volume? Yes, I would. But I think the bigger thing for me is maybe the drive rate is fine, but like, can we see a little bit more passing out of those situations?
I think it's a combo of those two. I think the 3-point stuff is like, yeah, we want more volume from everybody, and him included. But like, he is already someone that like you're getting yelled at if you let him alone on the perimeter. Like that's as the defense is like, they're paying attention to him in ways that it's like, okay, that's in terms of like what that means for our offense as a whole. Like he's doing that at a level that's like, okay, he's a problem. We can't ignore him. We actually have to really devote resources to not losing track of him. It has to be just continued facility, putting the ball on the floor because he's going to be closed out on hard, because it's often going to be big guys running at him, beating that first guy, and then not having a higher turnover rate than assist rate, which he does have right now. He's turning it over more than he's getting assists. So like he doesn't need to be diming everybody up, but it needs to be 2 dribbles, draw foul, 2 dribbles, swing to the other corner, like that kind of stuff. That type of feel on the ball needs to be better. Which again, I think like he's played fewer than 90 career games. Like that I think if you talk all the time about, or you hear all the time about like just seeing pictures, like seeing the same situation enough times to where it just becomes rote, like how you handle it. They're not asking him to make like advanced reads. It's like beat the guy on the closeout, make one quick decision. I do think he's going to be good at that, but right now he just actually is not.
He's done a lot better this season at drawing. We're working with such a small sample size, but he has like a higher percentage of his fouls being drawn are shooting foul percentages, right. And yet I don't know. And he's been fouled on drives. I don't necessarily trust him. Who would you trust more right now finishing through contact, him or Evan Mobley?
Oh, Mobley. Not close.
I'm still kind of waiting for him to make that kind of leap, but there's no. The only thing with him would be availability. Is if you're really going to harp on something, you said.
I'd still go stock up just because I think we've seen enough holding steady and incremental improvement at some of the secondary things. I think the fact that he just took a nasty fall. What do you want? And he fell right on his hip. That maybe that doesn't bust everybody's hip like it did for him, but it's not like he had another foot injury. So I'm discounting the durability concerns just a little bit.
I'm tempted to go stock neutral just to say he's shown so much over the past season and change just as an actual player. I'm going to go stock up as well for him. Next up on our board is Scoot Henderson, which he's fascinating, Grant, in the sense that if you just look at the numbers compared to the counting stats per last year, there's not a ton of difference here. If you watch Scoot, and you could split up the season where he goes on that heater and it looks great. But I think the best way, when you watch him, everything just feels better. Mm-hmm. And they were playing, oh man, what was the game? It was the game that they lost to the Lakers. And they come out of it. It's the first game out of the All-Star break. Pretty much everybody looks awful with the exception. Donovan Clingan came to play that game. But Scoot started 0 of 6 or 0 of 7 or something. And I'm watching him the entire time wow, this guy's going to be really good. And I think that's the mark of just this is how much better it looks, is he is missing shots, but they were shots he should have taken. Mm-hmm. He wasn't forcing it. His control and poise when he's on the ball is just way better. And then, yes, the counting stats, you could break it up into a season and you could find that, okay, there's sort of the material changes. But you look at just his scoring. He was in the 8th percentile of self-created scoring efficiency last year. He's in the 65th now. That's a pretty big jump. His rim finishing, still touch and go. I think a lot of it kind of has to do with just takeoff points and angles. But his rim percentage is still 10 points higher than it was last year. He's more dangerous, trying to get to that floater. And you look at, this is a big one, just on jumpers, his effective field goal percentage as a rookie, 43.1, that's up to 49.8 this year. And you can even just look at, okay, the 3-point percentage is higher. You trust him to knock down a catch and shoot 3 now. I think his command over the game has gotten way better on the ball. I think he's not I think you could, if you want to hem and haw, is the quality of the passes where it needs to be if you want a floor general. I think that he's eventually going to get there. But when you kind of look at what he's doing in the lane, the patience he has when he's going up against traffic, just the handle, the decision-making, everything feels, even though I think his turnover percentage might be up, everything just feels, the fundamentals look, they feel, and they are better. And so as someone that you need to trust to be able to hit jumpers, whether he's on or off the ball, or just get into the lane and make things happen, and maybe you're not necessarily trusting it at the most deliberate pace where it's okay, let's slow things down in the half court and send him a ball screen. There could still be some iffiness there. He's gotten better there too, especially as a playmaker to me. And so this is, one, he is working off an incredibly low baseline from last year. And I think that helps his stock. But I think if you objectively just look at this season, he has had one of the more encouraging just sophomore campaigns in a vacuum, not even looking at, Scoot, look at what he was last year compared to this year.
Yeah, I think for the exact reason you said, his stock is up just because it was pretty bottomed out as far as, a player with his kind of draft pedigree and profile could get. Do you think let's say he had played at exactly this level in his rookie season, do you think that would have registered as a disappointment still, relative to where he was drafted and what we thought about him? If you could time travel back and he did this as a rookie, so 12, 5 and 3, 55 true shooting, that's still not going to, blow you away. Are you how are you feeling about this if it were his rookie season relative to expectations?
I hope I would be nuanced enough to feel really good about it, because when you look at what his role has been for the most part with the Portland Trail Blazers, but I think people still would have looked at it as a disappointment just because of where he was drafted. We said some pretty inflammatory things about
For
him
sure.
after he was drafted.
I
And
think
just
though,
what
no, I was
oh,
gonna say, I think like the difference, the numbers probably wouldn't have cut it. I think whether that's fair or not, whatever. But I do think, as you pointed out, just you've seen validation of like, oh, that was some real quick burst, or like, man, he looks strong, or like, oh, that was so the suddenness was there, and like the shots that should be taken are being you would have last year if he had done this last year, you would have been able to say like, I still kind of I see it, like I get it, I understand why everybody was so high on him. Whereas in his actual rookie season, like those were really few and far between. Forget the numbers, just like the instances where you could understand the vision of what a lot of people were saying he could be.
And he kind of showed hints of this like towards the end of last year. But like when you're just looking at some of the things of, okay, like 39.3% on a pretty good volume of catch and shoot threes, that's a big deal. The thing that I think I've struggled with the most, I believe in him as a foundational passer. And I think when you kind of mentioned, like, you saw the blow by speeds, but now I've been most impressed, like, okay, like he might have that and maybe he could use it even more. But there's also just that the word I used was like patience and poise. I've seen more of that. Like the game feels like it's slowed down for him. And so he doesn't feel the need to operate at a constant, like Amen Thompson operates at 11 out of 10 because that's just what he should do.
Right.
Like Scoot doesn't need to do that now. And like his game wasn't necessarily wired. If I had to point to an area of concern, I don't know. I'm intending to default to the Blazers just aren't built for him to be better. The finishing around the basket is really, really bad still.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it, like I said, takeoff points and angles, but I like Portland's spacing is nowhere near pristine. I mean, his rim shot quality, and again, I don't know how much to assign to him, where he's in the 4th percentile of rim shot quality versus the 3rd percentile last year. But like when you're looking at the personnel around him, the Blazers have how many players on the Blazers, let's frame it this way, away from the ball are considered an above average threat?
Yeah. I mean, Simons, like
that's it.
Yeah, it's hard. You'd be hard pressed.
It's not Sharp. It's not Avdia. It's not Grant anymore. It's not Toumani Camara, even when he's hitting his threes. And so I really do think that makes his job more difficult. I think, look, some of the lineups they've played him in, I think you could argue like that they've exacerbated that problem. So I'm willing to give it more time. But when you're kind of looking at how he might react to contact, or he shies away from it, where that's like where the takeoff stuff is weird, where it's like he's trying to avoid the contact, it does give me pause. But for right now, I think I still chalk it up to like the Blazers offense a lot of the time in the half court. Like that's just not really built for anyone who's not a caps lock megastar to create high percentage opportunities at the basket.
Yeah.
I'm going stock up here. And I mean,
if
you're going stock down, not you specifically, if anyone's going stock down on Scoot, I mean this without a hint of irony, I would love to see the justification behind that. Who you got next, Grant?
Got another Blazer, another of yours and my Blazers. Toumani Camara. So first of all, like have you seen his shot chart? Just like, it's one of the funniest shot charts. He should have come into the league and immediately been like time traveled back to the 2018 Rockets, where it's like you only shoot layups and you only shoot threes and you guard 5 positions. Like that's just what this guy is.
Actually, I don't know if you saw. Well, I haven't told you. Multiple sources tell me that Toumani Camara's shot chart acts as Cialis for Daryl Morey at this very moment. So
that's a much more succinct way to put what the point I was trying to make. Thank you. I think he's just now one of the premier 3-and-D guys in the league. We were like racking our brains over like, who are the 3-and-D guys a couple pods ago? And it's like, yeah, it's him. It's heavier on it's lighter on the 3 than the D part, but like he's a fine 3-point shooter that I think maybe is another year or so away from this of being like really seriously guarded. Isn't doing anything else with the ball. So he really is a true, like, kind of one thing offensive type of player. But the one thing he does is make threes at a decent enough clip to where he can be out there. He's, you need real creators. Portland has those, so that's fine. Defensively, though, just like he guards everything, and that has earned him the most minutes and most starts of any sophomore. So like that's not just, it's not like Portland doesn't have guys. Like they can play, they're sneaky deep. So he's earning all that with like elite role player type stuff. His matchup time is like illustrative of just like, we'll throw him on anybody. So in order, he has spent the most time guarding Devin Booker 1, and in descending order, SGA, James Harden, Anthony Edwards, Dame, Fred VanVleet, Jokic, sure, well, why not? Luka, Halliburton, Kevin Durant. Just like who you got, like whoever's a threatening scorer, that's who he's going to guard, and he's going to do very well. And I think like he's the way I would sum it up is he is an extremely limited but extremely useful like NBA starter, I think. And that's, I mean, he hinted at being this as a rookie, but like there aren't a whole lot of guys we're going to talk about. Maybe as I'm looking down the list, I don't think anybody else will say like that guy is a plus starter right now that could be on the floor in a conference finals, like in a fifth man role. Like that's a big deal. So, I mean, I feel like I'm telegraphing where my stock report's going to be, but
yeah, I mean, I'm horny for Camara as well. And I would probably say I might even be a little bit higher on him offensively than you, because this comes back to, again, what the Blazers are doing. But like some of the stuff he's been able to do, I don't think there's not going to be a ton of directionality to them, but like he can have those open space drives, and he's done a better job of passing out of some of them this year, it feels like. But like, it's not going to be, I'm trying to think of his offensive arsenal is like closer to Dorian Finney-Smith than like OG Anunoby, like where you're not going to see like OG Anunoby at least try and break guys down off the dribble and some spins. It doesn't always end well. So you could argue that Camara playing within himself, and the fact that just he's okay, like you will see him be in different spots on offense, but the fact that he's okay, like floating out to the corner, lifting up from the corner, like that's a big deal. Like some players don't, especially this young, they don't want to do that, especially when they're trying to get paid, because he's on that. So they have him dirt cheap next year, and then they have the team option the following year. We'll see if they decline it and like, you know, play the restricted free agency game. But he's so good. Like this is going to be, I don't think he's going to be a star. Like that would kind of surprise me. But like when you mentioned an OG Anunoby type, could you see a scenario where he has that type of just value and reputation around the league? Or do you think that OG was viewed as someone who had significantly more ball skills and that was kind of part of his mystique?
Yeah, it's weird because like no one would say OG was like I always feel like his offensive game was like good enough to where you're talking about like he could attack, he could physically overpower guys, and you know he could get you. I think he probably shot a slightly higher volume of threes and definitely has had some much more efficient 3-point shooting seasons. Kamara's at just under 37% this year, so like that's plenty good enough for what he brings defensively. I think OG, if he could get to an Anunoby level, like that's probably about the ceiling. I think the other thing to just, you know, throw a little cold water on is like he's going to be 25 before in May, I think. So this is like, you know, he is a player whose athleticism matters, and so like he I think, you know, he's in his prime today. Like it's not saying he can't stay here for like 3, 4, 5 more years, but like I'm not sure I see a ton of upside. And if it did come, I think it would be, as you alluded to, like just a little more versatility offensively, like being a little more threatening, attacking with the ball. But like, just again, the very limited things that he's asked to do, he's great at. So I just, he fits. And also find the team he doesn't fit on. Like the team doesn't exist.
And by the way, if he's adding versatility, it's not coming on the defensive end. Like it has to. What else is he supposed to do defensively? And by the way, there's some value in that where, okay, let's say his athleticism wanes, like the fact that he spent so much time on like these bigger dudes where it's, well, just go defend Jokic and like a bunch of fours if he's not able to keep up with the smaller point of attack guys moving forward. So stock up for me. What about you?
Big time. Yeah. Stock up.
This next player is mine. Amen Thompson. Another guy we love around these parts. Like I said, really positive exercise that we're going through right now. This is just kind of another case where, and if you have anything to add, like the defense is just, he's a defensive monster. He's a disruptor. I think he has the potential to, I think a lot of people like to gravitate towards the players who will either guard up or just kind of like absolutely just shut down one player. If we're ever looking at, can a perimeter guy win defensive player of the year? I don't know if he fits that archetype, but if someone who's not a 5 is going to win defensive player of the year in the near future, I would have Amen Thompson on the short list of players who would be eligible for. Like he has everything, just the instincts, the playmaking, and there's just like, you can't beat him. Like he's just so explosive. You just can't beat him.
Yeah. He's like, I'm trying to think who used to have this. You would see it from like guys like Chris Dunn or Dennis Smith, where it's like, it's just all you want as a ball handler is like, get this guy away from me. And Thompson is that guy right now, except he's way bigger and longer and more athletic. And like even more, he's got to be like the most predatory defender just because he really just attacks guys. And just, I can't imagine a player less fun to be defended by than him. But the offense is really what we got to talk about, right? In terms of like ceiling and growth and that kind of thing.
And I think I'm still trying to figure out what his ceiling is. But when you watch him this year, and I've said this a few times, a lot of players who have his skill set, or let's say limitations right now, like you want to get them ahead of steam when they're catching the ball. And he does get that when he's operating in transition or even in the half court. But his dead stop speed is insane.
Just explosive.
Like this is like it doesn't matter how far. If you watch some of the Rockets games and it's like, okay, he catches the ball and then defenses are just sagging off him because it's all right. He's not a threat as a shooter, but like that'll be able to stop the drive. No, it won't. Like it just won't. Like you could station that person all the way back at the basket and he will still somehow beat them to the rim. And I think if you go back and watch like last year's drives versus this year's, it does feel like there's sort of a more unpredictability, like changes in, I won't say pace so much as direction. That's a big deal because it's like, all right, this doesn't need to be someone who's attacking from like a 45 angle or just from above the, like, no, like he will get to where he wants to go by, like he will spin. The footwork this year has been incredible. Like I feel like it's illegal like to have his type of Euro step where it's just like, it's almost teleportation, but it feels so much more like explosive than that. And that's like, there's no notes there. Like, I think that's just a huge part of his game and it makes up for some of his limitations. I think the other thing too, is because he's able to operate from those dead stops, he's now in the 86th percentile of self-created shot making efficiency. That's up from 57th last year. So like he was above average technically last year in a somewhat smaller role. I think the thing I've been most impressed with, and we did see this last season, both you and I believe had questions about, well, will it work with Şengün or some of these other offensive setups? I haven't looked at the recent numbers, but like for the season, those lineups with Şengün are working because Amen Thompson is just always like maybe not always, but he's willing to always move. Like there's whether he's going to be in the baseline or he's going to be in the dunker spot or he's going to, come and attack from 45 degrees in. Like he is always moving. You could use him. You're not doing this in a shit ton of high volume, but if you really want to, he has the strength. He kind of has the size, and we've seen him like he set some good screens this year. And I think what also helps, by the way, just to give Şengün a hat tip, is just like he is someone who's willing to set ball screens that like feel way higher up on the floor than a lot of other bigs. And so I think that's also helped the Rockets out in certain instances. But Amen Thompson's ability to just move without the ball, read the game without the ball, it allows him to fit with basically almost anyone, I would say. The questions I have, there's the jump shot. And I think, look, the mid-range percentage is up. He's went from 37% last year from mid-range to 42% this year. He's shooting about 52% on floaters, up from 48% last year. And he is shooting 35% on threes from the corners, but 15% above the break. None of it, like the floater is a modest, like medium-sized part of his game. None of it's super high-end. And I think what's going to be really key for him is, can one of those become, like whether it's hitting shots from the corners or whether it's hitting, off of drives, off of like driving kicks, can he hit those above the break threes? Or can the floater just be an even more dangerous part of his game where, okay, you're going to play off me, I'm not necessarily going to go by you. Like I'm going to flip up this floater a little bit more. I don't know where that's going to end up. The efficiency on floaters is certainly encouraging, as is the change in direction with his handle. I think that's going to be a swing part of his game. And the final thing just that I've noticed before throwing it to you, I find the playmaking interesting. He'll do serious damage against scrambling defenses, whether it's in transition or they're reacting to him when he's operating from that dead stop. I still think that he's probably a little bit too dependent if you're going to work in more deliberate situations. If he has to back down someone or wait off the catch, he kind of needs to let things develop around him. At the same time, we have seen him throw some like truly obscene live dribble passes. And I think that if the Rockets eventually assemble more shooters around him, or as his own offensive jump shooting opens up, like those sort of avenues of playmaking are going to be even more available to him. But I don't necessarily know how to feel about him as a playmaker just yet.
So that is, you're reading my mind, because I think we have to look at the theory of him as like, okay, should he be a guy that's in the corner? Like, he's had most of his success in the dunker spot for like a lot of his career so far. But if we put him in the corner and okay, because he can make shots from there, are we foreclosing on the possibility that like this guy might just be the Rockets point guard going forward? Like, that was part of the package that, was maybe, I don't know if you could see it easily, but it was in there when you were discussing him as a prospect. And so like, I think it was a couple weeks ago, I was listening to Ben Taylor, and in fairness, he was comparing, he was drawing the comparison between someone like LeBron or Luka or Jokic, who manipulates the defense and is like doing stuff before the pass that indicates like, I understand what I need to do to these 9 other pieces to maximize this possession. And he contrasted that with Thompson specifically, saying like, he doesn't do that at all. And now it's in his second year. He may not be a point guard, but so it's just, I think those two things, like his pretty basic, I'm not disagreeing at all with some of the passes that he throws on the move. Like, he does see things, but pretty basic understanding of like, or rudimentary maybe is the better word, of like how to manipulate the other players on the floor when he has the ball to like create opportunities. And then with the shooting limitation. So it's like, which of those I don't know, which of those do you think is most likely to kind of develop? And then that has to inform like which role he ultimately plays for the Rockets, right? Because like, he can't be the point guard or the primary initiator, I don't think. Well, it's hard to do it either way if you can't shoot, but you really can't do it if you're sort of like, I can make the one pass, but I can't, bend the defense or move this guy here or there or set things up. You can't be the point guard. And like, if you can't make threes from anywhere but the corners, like, I don't really know what that means for you as like a wing, like, so which of those do you have more confidence in him, not being deficient in?
I'll frame it this way. I have more confidence in him showing more layers and levels as a scorer than I do a passer, because I don't know if it's not that you need to play offense this way, but it's like, look at kind of Ja Morant, where we kind of know what like his first step speed can be, but like you would trust him to run your actual offense in the half court. And he has his own limitations, of course, but I just don't see that type of methodicality from Amen Thompson just yet. A year or two, though. And it's also, by the way, it's not a role that they've asked him to play in a shit ton of volume, because their offense is like, it's not that it's by committee, but it's so many of these other different options. But they have doubled his pick and roll ball handling volume from last year. And again, not like a fulcrum of his game at the moment. And then just the returns have just been meh. And I don't know, some of it, again, like when you look at some of the drive, like the turnovers on his drives when he's trying to kick out to players, whether it's behind him, like off to his side, I think you can argue that if the Rockets had like more threatening shooters around him, like those passes will become easier. But that's not really, I don't think that's, because if you told me, okay, the Rockets are going to have a ton of, it's 4 out, like 4 above average shooters around him, okay, the playmaking will get better. But I don't think that's what you're asking either, where it's, if you want him to be the floor general, as of right now, I don't necessarily see him being that type of player.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like me asking that is a little unfair, because I think he's going to be a really good player. He is really good player. I think he's going to be an even better player. Like, even if he continues to be like a sub 30% 3-point shooter and never develops as a passer, just because he'll get better at the stuff he's already good at. And he's already good at enough different things that like the gravity thing, like he has no gravity off the ball, but because he moves, defenses cannot let him like take a handoff or come off a screen with any kind of advantage or any kind of space, because he's just going to athletically overwhelm you and make that space like devastating. So like he's not someone you get to ignore. It's like, we're not talking like a Tony Allen type thing where he's just standing in the corner. Like, so I think there are ways for him to leverage what he's great at to be like a more dynamic offensive player than he even is right now. But like, to be like the guy, like offensively, I think one of the two things we're not sure about probably needs to happen, for like talking like all-star stuff. Otherwise, he's going to be he's a good starter today. Like and that'll continue. But the ceiling is really interesting, because he could reach it and in like ways that several different types of players ultimately. Like that's the other, I don't know what kind of offensive player ultimately he's going to be.
It wouldn't, this isn't a perfect analog, so I don't know that I'll ever see him the way that Giannis operates offensively, but I might have said this after the second season of Giannis's career.
Yeah.
Everything felt so abrupt from him, but he's turned into just a more deliberate scorer. And like, no, do you trust the mid-range jumper all the time? But like, he just has all these different counters offensively, and you would trust him as a secondary playmaker. Now, one of the Bucks' bigger issue was they want someone aside from Dame to be more of a primary guy. So maybe it's similar in the sense of, okay, if he becomes Giannis as a playmaker, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, like he's not as cerebral, but like from a body composition standpoint, and like there like a Jimmy Butler type offensive game where it's like, he's not hunting threes. He's just going to get to his spot and have good feet and be strong. Like there's no reason Thompson can't be someone that's getting to the line like 8-9 times a game. Like that kind of thing could come too.
Yeah, his free throw attempt rate is up this year as well. I'd be curious. He does see, I don't know if this is just not enough. He's so fast, but like he's not the best at finishing through. Like he's had some really tough finishes, but I think part of that is when he's trying to finish through contact, it's like increasing the distance between him and the hoop. And like we just know his limitations there. But I do think just the progression as even a floater shot maker, like that percentage climbing, it's a good harbinger if you have any concerns about him there. So I'm stock up on him for sure.
Yeah, it's big time stock up for sure.
Who you got, Grant? Oh wow, who's this guy?
We got Pods. We got Brandin Podziemski, man of several seasons already in this year. So I think the first thing that I feel most confident about is that like he's just not a star. He's not going to be a star. I think he can be a decent starter, maybe a little better than that, who looks great when surrounded by other smart players, because like he does have real limitations. The shooting is just like, if you had to just boil down the, like, how good can Podziemski be? It's like, is he going to make a league average percentage from three? Like that's kind of just it, because
do you just provide have him recover from, what was it, an abdominal injury each time, and then he'll come back and
something like that. Yeah. So that's the thing. So he's had 3 months under 30% from three this year and 2 months over 40. So like, which is it? I think
the second one, obviously.
Sure, of course. and like I think if that's your position, you can point to he's making 75% of his free throws this year, which is much better than last year and much better than early this season when it was like, how is it possible that a guard is in the 60s or he's in the 50s for a minute? Like that can't be sustainable. So the shooting's the swing skill. I think like we've got enough of a sample of the plus minus stuff and the defensive estimated plus, like he's a 91st percentile guy in DEPM. That's just like playmaking, nose for the ball stuff, like takes a million charges, tends to be in the right spot, gambles like fairly selectively and is successful at it. The defensive rebounding, he's an awesome rebounder for a guard. It's really just a continuation of last year. The difference being we saw what it looks like when, like the ball's not going in and he can't score at all. And he looks unathletic. Like he's been a real peaks and valleys player this year. I think the difference lately is just that like the Warriors have another smart offensive player in Jimmy Butler, and that has everybody cutting harder, and Podziemski's good at that. And just, he makes more sense when he can just be like a supplementary piece that does a bunch of smart shit and like plays hard. I don't know what more, maybe you tell me, like, do you think that's like a too limiting of an assessment for him, where it's like, he's a high end role guy and I'm not sure the ceiling goes much above that?
No, I'd be with you. And I said some pretty inflammatory things after last year because I looked at the separation and just the percentage of what he was doing on his step back jumpers. And everyone's so concerned about the lack of athleticism or what's he going to do going downhill or can he hit jumpers? I'm like, we just have evidence here. Those percentages have plummeted. And I think the more you watch him, you kind of understand, all right, if he's going to be limited from the perimeter and that when it comes to shot creation. And then I don't know. I know he guards at the point of attack a ton, but like, do you consider him that level? He's a very smart defender, but is he that level of a defender? And if he's not, then what is he?
That's the thing. Like I don't think anyone would confuse him with like a shutdown type of defender. I think like he's listed at 6'5". I don't see 6'5". When you watch, he doesn't play 6'5" except as a rebounder. I think I think he's smart off the ball. He does a lot of smart things, like getting in position for charges. He definitely reads the floor really well. And like that goes a long way defensively. But I don't see a scenario where you're ever consistently putting him on a guy that you need to like stop. I think he can be part of a very good defense. I think there's no question about that. I don't know if he's going to be someone that's like the reason the defense is good, on his own. So like, I think it's a lot of the same stuff. Like, when he looks worst on offense, it's when he's trying to create a shot and he gets to 12 feet and gets like stuck because he's not long enough to finish over people. And he's got like creative footwork and he gets off a lot of weird shots that like he kind of doesn't have any business getting off. It's similar on defense where it's like he'll do the right things, but at some point, I think the athletic and size limitations make it so that he can't, I think, be a consistent like shut down, clamps on type of guy. Maybe against like certain matchups you can see him do that, but I don't think consistently.
Yeah, I'd probably be stock neutral on him at this. I'm not down based off how he started the season, but I was so confident in him being able to be like more of a perimeter shot maker.
Yeah.
And maybe the past 2 months has been the harbinger of what's to come, but I just don't like, what is it? Who would be a comp, not in terms of play styles of player, but use role player. I'm talking about just in terms of value. Like what would be a comp of what this, and like, look, for where you drafted him, he'll outperform his draft position regardless.
Yeah. I think like, so like on the low end, I guess, even though this guy's a useful player, like it's kind of, there's some TJ McConnell, like plays at a fast pace, like is not a super, he's a more threatening shooter than McConnell for sure, but like is getting into the lane and trying to make stuff happen and is an irritant on defense and does smart things. That's a low end. Like if you go higher end, it's like, I don't know who that he's not an on ball, like Dragic type, just to use another like white lefty, or like, cause Dragic could really play point guard and was a high volume, like dangerous 3-point shooter. But he had a bunch of craft, like similar craftiness. It's a hard comp. I would say I'm also stock neutral just to jump it because he was fifth in rookie of the year voting last year, and like he's somewhere in that range.
All defense votes last year too, by the way. That's egregious, correct?
What'd you say? He
got all defense votes last year.
I don't remember that. I think, well, if you lead the league in charges by 10 miles, I guess that sways some people. But
what do you think about this comp? The rim pressure is not this, like it's not even close to the same with the rim finishing. And maybe I'm just focused on the fact that they're so like these eclectic type players, but Josh Hart.
That's interesting. I like the rebounding is kind of on the nose.
Good enough on defense, but not excellent on defense.
Yeah. And the defensive impact is more because of like energy level and like competitiveness than, he's just like so physically gifted or that kind of, yeah, that's an interesting one. And you could, even the 3-point shooting, like coming and going, I think is a good through line for that too. Yeah, maybe Hart plays bigger though. That would be the biggest difference is other than rebounding, Podziemski profile, like offensively, Podziemski plays like he's 6 feet, like that, that's a big difference there. Hart is finishing into contact and like it's just one of the best transition finishers around, like that kind of thing. He plays bigger, but yeah, that's a better comp than any of mine. That's interesting.
So are you stock up or stock down on him?
I think it's neutral. I think like the plus minus stuff like is what it is. And eventually we won't be able to ignore it. Like he is kind of a winning player, but like he's a complimentary winning player, I think, which is what we knew last year.
Stay tuned for Friday for more on maybe Brandin Podziemski. Might have a nice little discussion going on there. I am up with my final deep dive sophomore, remains smitten with Ausar Thompson. So, I mean, I could spoil it and just say I'm stock up for him. I think it took a little while for him to, if you want to say, get going. He came back from the blood clot, wasn't available to start the season. We'll get into the limitations. I think, and we're going to just compare the two because they're twins.
I was just going to say, I'm an idiot. Can you just tell me the differences? That's what I'd like to know.
I will. I won't just say that because I want to give Ausar Thompson some credit. And I think, look, they're being used in different ways. I think in terms of floor awareness and as a passer, I like Ausar Thompson a lot better than Amen Thompson there. And when you look at Ausar Thompson just kind of operating, if you're going to get like, they're not even going to give him a ton of ball screens necessarily, but like he will more methodically break down defenses in the half court. Now, there's only so much like that means when you don't. I think right now he's even more limited when you look at the floater percentages. They're a smaller part of his game. He's shooting worse from three than Amen Thompson. But what I've really liked seeing the Pistons doing, and it feels like anecdotally there's been an increase in of like Cade Cunningham, even when he's on the floor, is not always going to bring up the ball. Like Ausar Thompson will do it. And I think that's created a lot of opportunities to unlock his playmaking, give Cade breaks, give him an ability to showcase what he's able to do off the ball. I think just Ausar Thompson's awareness of the surroundings is huge in the half court. And that extends to, by the way, this is something that Amen Thompson's also good at. Like this extends to when he's off the ball as well. Ausar knows how to utilize the dunker spot. I think what he's done a really good job of, because when you look at Alperen Şengün and maybe where the players are setting their primary screens, like as Şengün or Jalen Duren, or even just where they're stationed a lot of the time, Şengün, to me, objectively gives Amen Thompson more room to work with. Jalen Duren does not. Like, and that's just the type of play. Because if he's not going to be involved in the screening action, even if he is, how high are you going to have him come out? And so I think Ausar Thompson's had to work within. I think you can make the case that maybe there's better shooters around him in certain lineups, but like he's had to work off of a tougher situation big, I would say. Like, because Şengün's just better than Duren on offense. Hot take there. I know. So I appreciate like his floor navigation when he's away from the ball. But the passing to me is like a big deal. I don't know if he's ever, we mentioned this with Amen Thompson, they have the same limitations in the sense of, all right, if you want them to just run a pick and roll, or if you want to give them a ball and have them just run the offense conventionally, that's not something that he's necessarily fully equipped to do. But I will say, I think he's a lot better at it than Amen Thompson is right now, because Amen Thompson feels as a playmaker more reliant on his speed than Ausar Thompson does at this point. And I honestly, the other thing too, and this would come down to a difference between them, who do you feel about better defensively, like as the one-on-one type of guy?
So I think I have to say this is the problem. I would say Amen, but the question I was going to ask you is like, if you just had both of them playing like the same minutes and role, I don't know if I think it would be like, oh, it's a wash, because like to say that Ausar is anything less than like a terrifying defender is just wrong.
No, he is. He's like, he has some of the playmaking aspect, but I feel like he also kind of has more of the, and I think Amen is kind of more disruptive. And if you're going to look at what someone is doing as breaking up these plays, or maybe we get to a point where the counting stats might, like those counting defensive stats will favor Amen heavily. But if you're just asking me like, who's more likely to be the type of defender where, I don't know if this is the player that popularized it. Maybe it's just my first recalling it back in, 2011, where it was Kawhi Leonard's going to be on you. And like, you're our best offensive player or scorer. We're not going to involve you in the offense because we don't want Kawhi Leonard involved. Like, it feels that Ausar Thompson to me is more of that type of a defender than Amen Thompson would be. Maybe that's splitting hairs. Maybe it's wrong. Again, they're fewer than 100 games into their career, so we will see. The questions with him, and again, I love the changes in pace on the ball from him as well. He's up on floaters this year, but they're still only 44.4% versus 29.4% last year. 3 of 17 on corner threes, which is 18%. I think that's going to be the swing skill for him. Is just like, is he going to have one of those? And I think in his case, and maybe this changes as the complexion of the Rockets changes, but in his case, it might be more important. Yeah, he's great at working in from the baseline. I mentioned the dunker spot stuff. He also deserves credit because he's shooting 60% on twos with Duren on the floor and without Duren on the floor. And so that's like the fact that you could play him with Jalen Duren. We've seen some minutes with Ron Holland as well. Like, that matters. Does it feel like it's going to be more important for him than Amen Thompson to be like more of an off-ball jump shooter, or like because Cade Cunningham is just there in Detroit?
Yeah, and I think so. That's the thing, is like what they're being asked to do is very different. Since I personally can't stop just comparing the two. Like, I think I'd feel differently if in Detroit Ausar was on the ball as much as Amen was. And then I'd be like, well, he could, it's not like necessity that he becomes a league average 3-point shooter the same way it is with Amen, because there's another way for him to be a real plus offensively. But Cade is the guy. And so that's been the thing in Detroit forever, is just how do we play off of him? And so he's just going to have to be a shooter.
Yeah, so I think that would be something to consider. But again, the complexion of the Rockets could change if they make a consolidation trade or something over the summer. The other thing we already mentioned, like the off-ball movement is going to be there. Is there anything else that either stands out or is like a concerning part for you? And like, what do you see? We talked about Ahmed, like the long-term vision for Amen Thompson. Like, what is the long-term vision for him then?
I think I guess it's clearer because, just to reiterate, like, I don't think there's a scenario where Ausar is like a high usage on the ball playmaker, because that, seat's taken. Like that's Cade Cunningham. So I think the difference is, I don't know that there's a huge difference in skill set. Honestly, I have a really hard time like picking out like, oh, definitely this is different between the two of them. I think the differences will just become apparent in like, well, Asar's going to be asked to handle like slightly more specific things, I think. And can he do that? So, and in a way that's a little disappointing, because it is going to limit him, I think, a little bit. Do you feel like, I've always had this feeling, well, more so last year, like Thompson seems like...
Which Thompson?
Great, thank you. So I'm looking at Ausar Thompson on the screen, so like obviously he knows what I'm talking about. Ausar feels to me more like, if things don't work out on offense, I'm kind of cool with him. He's my power forward, or like, whereas I guess we should say that about Amen too, because he's done all the dunker spot stuff and he rebounds really well and he's strong. But for some reason, I view Ausar as like that fallback feels more comfortable to me. Maybe because he had better shot blocking numbers, I think, specifically last year. Do you have that sense, or is it more they're just both either wings or guards?
No, so I think.
Or do you think the opposite?
No, I don't think the opposite. I guess I would feel about the same if like the jumper's not going to pan out for the two of them. But I do think that if you remove the thermonuclear athleticism from their games, I find what Ausar Thompson does so far slightly more cerebral, where it's, if you had to have him set screens more as an than he does now, I would trust him more out of that. And I think just because I mentioned at the top of this, just the way we've seen, and this might be a reps thing or the way that they're using him thing, but like they've had to slow things down when he has the ball in his hands offensively. And so like we've kind of seen more pathways for him as a passer there. I would feel if you took away that just detonative athleticism, I feel better about Ausar Thompson as the player.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's kind of, I'm saying the same thing in a different way. So is the stock up or stock down? Because like, I mean, had a weirdly...
Why would the stock be down? Just is it because like the offensive efficiency hasn't climbed in the way that it has for...
No, just because that's the premise here.
No, I thought you were actually considering... I'm stock up. I think as a scorer, here's an interesting question. As a scorer, we both definitely have more questions about Ausar than Amen. Like that's...
Yeah, I think that's right. But other than that, like he's stock up for me. Like all his per 36s are significantly improved. He's like, he would basically just be leading the league in steals if he were playing, 36 minutes and getting to the line a little more. Everything is ticking up. Even it's modest, but he's up over 20% from three. That's better than 18%. Like the questions largely though are the same. Going to make shots, or are you going to be an on-ball guy? And we'll just that determines how good or great these two can both be.
Is there some? I way off there when I said at the beginning where it does feel like Amen Thompson is more disruptive, but you even look at Ausar Thompson and you're like what is his block rate is higher this. Oh no, it's lower than it was last year. Maybe that's just why I'm like, but like his steal rate, he's almost at a 4% steal rate this year. Is that just completely? But like insane that I'm saying that, or is it like, it's a feel thing watching them, and maybe it's because if it like Ausar Thompson spending more time guarding the ball.
Well, I still can't get out of my head like what was it? Maybe I think it was an early season game against Minnesota where Amen, just like if it was Edwards or if it was Conley or who, it was a lot of Conley, where he just like, my vision of Amen is like if you're a 1 or a 2. And you see him matched up across from you, it's just like a nightmare. Whereas Ausar, I feel like, is more someone that's out there on like the Tatum type guys, that like those size players. Maybe the matchup data totally puts the lie to this, but I think of them defensively a little differently, where Amen is like, has no right to be as quick and predatory as he is for his size. And so he's just like terrible, like he's a terror against smaller guards. Whereas Ausar is just like, you put him on a wing and it's clamps. Like I don't know why I think that, but that's just how I view slight differences defensively.
Stock up for both of them, though. So congratulations to the Thompson twins, who are separate people, despite Grant deciding that they're just one human being. We're going to enter the more of the quick hitter portion of this to run through some guys with our impressions of. And next up, this is our final deep dive. How can I forget about Bilal Coulibaly, our guy?
Well, unfortunately, there's a good reason you might have forgotten about him. Is he's been quite a bit worse this year in a couple of important ways. The shooting has regressed significantly. He has been worse from 2 and notably worse from 3. He's 28% from 3 this year. And the volume's higher just marginally, but he was 35% last year, which was with his athleticism and potential was like, okay, this is a guy. He still could be that guy. This is age 20 season. He's younger than a lot of the players we've talked about. And he's in a situation that, like, playing for Washington, if you're drawing any far reaching conclusions about almost anybody, like, good luck, because the environment is just not conducive to like major development other than the fact that you can have a really big role before you're ready for it. I think it sort of offsets the shooting stuff that there is. Partly it's just Washington trying to do this, I think, but there has been like pretty legitimate like playmaking growth, which his assist rate is almost doubled, 8 to 15%, and the turnovers have stayed about steady. The time of possession, this is where it's like, well, is it because he should be doing this or because Washington has to? He's also kind of doubled his time of possession per game in terms of just like minutes on the ball. He's playing 6 more minutes a game this year, so it's not quite like a straight, he's 2-to-1'd it, but like it's been a significant role shift for him. So like ultimately, I don't know if we or the Wizards should see him as someone that really will be on the ball a lot. I think where I land, though, is that it is a positive that at this early juncture of his career, Coulibaly is like at least sort of like testing the bounds of like, what can I be as an on-ball guy? Because the best version of him is he is a do-it-all, first option big wing. Like that's if you could draw it up, that's like his 100th percentile outcome. That's absolutely ideal. It's optimal. So I'm encouraged that Washington seems to be viewing it that way too. And it's not like, well, let's specialize him somehow, or let's let him only stick to what he's good at, which at this point is like, how do you even determine that? So like, if you're just looking like pure numbers, I think maybe you're discouraged. The scoring average is up, but he's playing more, he's shooting more, he's just making lower percentages. So it's like counting stat stuff that can be, misleading. I think the thing that I'm holding out hope with and like am encouraged by is just the role has changed enough to where I think the vision of the best version of him is still there. And it's a little easier to see it because, 3.5 assists a game this year, that doesn't seem like a lot, but doubling your assist percentage year over year, not turning it over more. I think you can definitely view that as like, there's something here that feels like star quality years from now, but it's, again, he's 20. Like, how do you, we've like sort of fetishized, like, this guy looks like someone who can do everything as a rookie. And he was billed as like super raw. Have you, based on this year, changed like that basic analysis?
No, I think I've been happy with, you mentioned the possession time. I didn't realize like how big that it jumps, but I think when you watch him, you can tell they're on the ball more. He's driving more. And so to get that sample size, and if you decide, okay, hey, it needs to be lowered or stay here, tapered off, whatever. At the same time, like you already kind of mentioned, the playmaking reads that he's made a lot better than last year. The fact that the finishing at the rim has not only held up, but gotten a lot better too. I think that's a big deal for him. And so even if there's, I want to call it the worst case scenario, but maybe more of a modest outcome for him on the offensive end, like him being able to do that, I think he is someone who I would like to see set more screens. I know someone of his size is not particularly used in that ilk, but because of the way that he's like, he can finish through contact. And so I might like to see him, especially when you're playing with Alex Sarr, who can be a floor spacing big, and maybe you don't want him screening all the time. I would love to see more of that. And maybe we could, just as like they get a better feel for who he is and the roster around him becomes more cemented. I guess I would frame it this way. I might be a little bit lower on him offensively just because after 2 years, if you don't think he's going to be an efficient on the ball scorer, so it's okay. Do you think he's going to be a Jimmy Butler or a Paul George just on the level of that player? It feels like we're getting further and further away from that hope, but I feel better about him overall because I think there are different ways you can use him on offense and as the playmaking jump that we both mentioned. And then you haven't said this yet because I don't think we need to. He had an incredibly difficult defensive role last year. It has gotten harder this year and he has gotten better.
Yeah.
And so
the defense is like, I'm not concerned about the defense at all. Like that's still there.
So I think when you package that together, it makes the offensive uncertainty at this point. Would you say it's skews more intriguing than alarming? Like it's way more intriguing than alarming what he could be on offense right now.
Yeah, because the shooting regression was like, all right, you would have probably guessed that he wouldn't be as efficient as a shooter. And like, I think ultimately too, I've said ultimately like 5 times, that it's so hard to divorce like what he has improved at or regressed at from the situation. Like this Washington team is so young and so uninterested in winning games to where like, who's to say that if you didn't put like 2 good shooters around him, he might have more space to operate in, the assist rate would be even higher and he would be shooting 34% from 3 just because, like we could say this about every bad team, but the Wizards are like so bad that it really, you can't pretend it doesn't affect like what he's able to do on the floor. So like, if anything, maybe the fact that he's made any growth at all is like, well, we should view that as like a 3x improvement just because of the context.
And I kind of wonder, I mean, he's had some good talent. Like when you're looking at Jordan Poole, when you're looking at Malcolm Brogdon, and he did have Tyus Jones last year. It's like, well, will the quality of his off-ball shots go? Because you look at, okay, sub 32% on catch and shoot threes, because that's sort of that's the low hang. If you want to feel good about Bilal Coulibaly being a potential future all-star, it's this exact player you're watching right now, basically. But can he shoot 36, 37% on what is mostly a diet of, okay, catch and shoot wide open threes? And I when you watch his jumper, at least, it's not, oh, like this guy's a hopeless shooter. And I guess it's easier because we have proof of concept to some extent from last year. Maybe it boils down to like, does his offensive role need to be streamlined a little bit? Not to say like marginalized, but how much goes into it either needs to be marginalized, or is it just, does he need better players getting him the ball to where it's, okay, as Bub Carrington grows, as an example, or maybe as they get another type of playmaker in there, is that going to make his job even easier?
Yeah, that's why I think it is kind of a philosophical thing. And I skew towards, I think it's just better that he's being like sort of forced to do on-ball stuff. Like,
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like, but I think you're right. Like, if the Wizards just, I don't know, limited him insofar as that's possible when he is clearly just, one of the best, most accomplished players on a team, like you could see better, you might have more encouraging numbers in a lot of ways, but I think you need to view his age 20 season as like, how is this helping his age 24 season? Like, I think so in that sense, I think the Wizards are doing it right, even though it makes it feel like he's gotten worse in a lot of regards.
Where I think that they might be getting it wrong, but I don't know if this comes down to a personnel issue, is if just going back to Victor Wembanyama, former teammates, and they're not the same type of player. I think the Spurs have done a great job of, we know what he can do away from the ball and on from the ball both. And he's a central part of what they're doing, but like some of that stuff helped. Like they bring in Chris Paul this year. I don't know if the Wizards have yet given Bilal Coulibaly that opportunity, because the low-hanging fruit feels like, why isn't he cutting more? Why isn't he just moving when he doesn't have the ball more? I mentioned the screening thing. We've seen like some of it, but not a ton. And it was something I noticed, or I think that I noticed during his rookie season. So I want like to see more of that. And I just keep coming back to, the on-ball reps, like the from scratch reps, those are important. And I'm glad they're giving them to him. But I'm like, well, why aren't we trying this stuff? And it comes back to, do you think that they even have the personnel to do that, though? I guess maybe my long way of asking you.
Yeah, maybe you can only like, I don't know, like road test a couple things at once. And like they could have chosen to, guess what, you're going to set 10 screens a game or something, and let's see what happens. Like maybe you just can't, you just have the bandwidth for that, because you're also trying to develop Alex Sarr and you're trying to see what Bub Carrington can do. And you got, a bunch of other priorities. I think it's hard to do all that at once. I'm encouraged by the choice that they made, that like they went with the time on the ball stuff. But it's a credit to Coulibaly that like, you could imagine them deciding instead that it was better to try these other three things
Right.
because he probably could do those things. Like that's where we leave it. Is I think I think I have to go stock down, but I think part of the reason it's down is because he's being asked to try stuff that might ultimately raise his stock like on a 5-year timeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll go stock neutral for the same reason, because I think that the number, if you wanted to have someone who was being used in a different way on offense, like you might just have a more efficient player. But like the fact that the fact that they feel like they should be giving him this exploration, then coupled with not only wasn't there defensive regression off of last year, but there was like active defensive improvement in a tougher role. Like that's big. So I'll go stock neutral, and that's more so we were both so high on Bilal Coulibaly to begin with that for me to have felt a lot better, he would have to be shooting like, oh look, he's like on self-created threes, he's shooting like 36% or something like that. Which is just not. Now, because I lied before, we are entering the quick hitter portion of the podcast. So going through some stock up, stock down for these sophomores. Grant, Jarace Walker, stock up, stock down.
I think it's down. Overall, like we weren't super high on him last year. I think he's got like, for me, it's like maximum confusion, maximum intrigue. I still think it's like he played incredibly well against the Cavs the other night, made a bunch of dumb mistakes at the same time. Like, is he a playmaker? Is he the good off-ball defender who was supposed to be in the draft? He's 38% as a 3-point shooter. Like, okay, so why aren't we playing him more? Like he's getting squeezed now because you got to play Aaron Nesmith, and that moves Mather into the bench. And like, I guess it's down because if he were that great, we wouldn't be having to figure out ways to get him on the floor. But I remain intrigued. I don't know what a Jarace Walker is.
And that would encapsulate what I'm going to say, which is also stock down. And I think one of the bigger disconnects is based off what he was billed coming out of college. I feel better about him as a plug and play offensive player, which was one of my bigger concerns for him, than I do about like him becoming someone that can positively impact the defense outside of, okay, maybe he'll have some counting stats, but he feels too all over the place at that. But then he hasn't gotten a ton of reps, like relative to where he was drafted in Indy right now.
Yeah. I think the stock down puts a lot of faith in the Pacers, like correctly evaluating what he can and can't do, which I think is a reasonable position to take. Like, cause if he were, I don't feel like he's being unjustly like marginalized. I think it's because like he has real deficiencies and makes mistakes and that kind of thing.
And there's just like, you could say there's a discrepancy in timeline, but like they still rely on Benedict Mathurin. Right. And I don't know how much him having the extra year matters, but I think you could argue that, well, I guess you have Toppin and Siakam and Turner. Couldn't you argue though, that in theory as a player type, shouldn't Jarace Walker be more important in Indiana than Benedict Mathurin, or no?
Yes. And that's why the fact that he's not playing is like a pretty gnarly omen. Like, cause he should be like, they could use him. I just don't think they view him as helpful yet.
Next up, Gradey Dick, Grant, stock up, stock down.
It's down. I think I'm at the point now where I feel like coming into I've almost circled back to like pre-draft stuff. Because we had a dalliance with like, oh my God, he's a playmaker. His assist to turnover is like 1-to-1 this year. Like that hasn't manifested after summer league stuff. I kind of think he needs to be like a 40% 3-point shooter to have a positive impact, because he's getting targeted on defense all the time. I don't know what else he does well enough other than potentially be a great shooter to like really be helpful. So I'm down on Gradey Dick. I think like if the playmaking had been more real or sustainable, I'd feel differently, because the defense I just don't think is going to be good enough either.
I'm stock neutral on him. I think the defense, if you're looking for someone, I guess, to target like in specific actions, sure. I think he's shown more as like kind of a helper, and if he's going to be able to make some certain like plays around the basket. So I'm not as like super low on his defense. I don't expect him to be a good defender. I'm not as low on his defensive outcome. I'd be very curious to kind of just see, like, the Raptors are another team where I would love to see what we've seen him do on the ball. What happens if he has better spacing to do it with? And so I feel better about his on-ball decision-making than I would have last year. And I think we'll eventually get to the point where their shooting is just fine. But from that initial high this year, remember when we recorded an entire segment on him where, like, they found like someone kind of more of a diamond in the rough who can work on the ball in addition to be a sniper away from it. I don't feel that highly of him.
Yeah.
Anymore, for sure.
And maybe that's our fault. Is we drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid early of summer league and early this year.
We did, but you mentioned this about Podziemski, and this is more about the players around him. But like Gradey Dick's kind of lived through like 8 different seasons when you're looking at the available personnel around him.
That's true. Yeah.
Next up, we have Cason Wallace. I could spend so much. We won't, but I could spend so much time.
Let me ask you: is he again? It's early. This is the wrong kind of question to ask. Is he gonna be more than a good defender who makes standstill threes?
Probably. I just don't see them asking him to do that when you have.
Can he do that? Do you think?
No, he can't. I think like there's a lot of it. There might be more to what he can do. I think we saw more from him, like even and probably because Alex Caruso is not there at that point. I know Alex Caruso was banged up for a good chunk of this season. Like we kind of saw a little bit more from him. It felt like as a driver last year, and that we're not getting the same sample size on where it feels like he's more likely to be kind of displaced away and used in quote unquote as a spacer. And I feel he's not hitting. It's like he's been a little bit better lately, I believe, but he's not like hitting his threes at the same clip compared to last year either. So it's tough, but I haven't seen anything that makes me think he's going to be more dynamic on offense. And I think it will get only harder for him to even have the opportunity to showcase that if he's in Oklahoma City, just because Nikola Topic is eventually going to play. And that's someone that they probably view as going to do more on the ball.
Yeah. I think like if Wallace could, if he were 2 inches taller or like played like a 6'6", 6'7" guy, as opposed to he's a shooting guard really, like size wise. And like, I think my evaluation of him would be different. Cause like if you're going to be his size and he takes 3.1 threes a game, 2.7 are catch and shoot. So he's just like, he is doing nothing as an off the dribble shooter. That's partly just the team. That's just those are the breaks when you have Shea and J-Dub and like, you're just not going to be an on ball type of guy. I just think like if he were a little bigger, then you're just a 3-and-D player. Cause I do think he's somewhere in between the 42% and the 33% of his last 2 years. Right. I think like he's 37-ish or whatever. And he has been way better than that from the corners in the past. But at his size, you got to have a little bit of on ball type of stuff. Otherwise you're just not going to really be hugely impactful.
He's actually a more frequent driver this year. So I was wrong about that. Maybe the Alex Caruso's absence maybe bumped up that volume a little bit. Could you see him being maybe a Malcolm Brogdon type? I know he was more dynamic at his best, but he'll do a lot of his playmaking out of the drives. And that's where I think Cason Wallace has at least shown that he can do that.
Yeah, I think I got the drives. So 4.1 drives up from 2.3, but he's playing 7 more minutes a game. So like it's an increase, but I don't know how substantial it is. And his free throw attempts are down despite playing more. So like
assist rate on drives is up though.
Yeah. Like so that's the thing is like, he doesn't seem like he's going to be a finisher, but he can be someone that's driving and maybe spraying the ball out. That's a possibility. That's probably the growth area, right? Is like he develops another year of a reputation as being a great 3-point shooter. Defenses react to him that way and he can drive and find guys. I think maybe that's like how he adds a little marginal value.
Now, does that mean you're stock down on him or are you stock neutral based on where we were with him last year?
I think I'd go stock neutral because I kind of felt last year that he's a limited 3-and-D type guy.
And 40% on threes since January 1st. And so like you said, it's probably somewhere between the 42% last year and the 33% this year. If he is a 40% 3-point shooter, I think it'll be sort of the Alex Caruso mold last year where it's all right. Well, it's not coming on like an insane volume.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Our next player, Keyonte George. I'm going to start here. My stock is down because my stock was too high last year. Like I was smitten. I think if I asked you, what do you feel best about for his game right now? What would be the answer?
I mean, I guess it's like his potential to be an off the dribble 3-point shooter that you can't go under screens on. Maybe like that's a niche thing, but I feel like that's of the options. I like that the best.
Yeah, I would probably say like I feel the best about his passing because wasn't the question of him coming out like, oh, is he going to be able to be that type of playmaker? And I think as the Jazz get better, you can envision it a little bit more, like just the live dribble things that he does. They're not always good decisions. I want to make that clear. I think some people will just say like Isaiah Collier, like that's going to be the guy. And it might even be, oh, is Keyonte George a third guard type of playmaker? And if that's a question we're asking, I have to go Stockton because I was prepared to say like, oh, this is someone who could like run your primary offense. I will still say the aesthetics of his game, like in terms of getting to his spots or getting off those off the dribble jumpers, the efficiency just doesn't align with it, but it doesn't like it looks so much better than like the actual
when
result.
He takes a three off the dribble, it looks like that's what he's supposed to be doing. You're like,
correct.
Yes, if you didn't know any of the percentages and you just walked in the gym and saw him shoot that shot, you'd be like, yeah, of course he should. Like that checks out, but the numbers just aren't there.
No, they're not. So I'm stocked down on him. What did you go with?
I think I'm down, although I will go back and cite, whenever we talked about him last, I had this ridiculous list of guys that had played as much as he had and shot as much as he had over his first 2 years and been as inefficient as he's been. And there's a lot of all-stars on that list. So that's like, the ceiling might still be there, but again, I, like you, was probably too high on him last year. So we got to go down.
This probably shouldn't be the thing I'm focusing on, but like he's just still sub 39% on the pull-up 2-pointers, and like those are the shots that I watch him take, and I'm like, no, like those like when he takes it, I think they're gonna go in. Like those are even the shots, maybe more so than the off the dribble threes. So, and he's taking more of the off the dribble threes. So yeah, stock down. Not completely out on him though, which I don't think we're completely out on anybody that we've been discussing. Brandon Miller. Right wrist injury, so he's not playing again this season. Limited sample size.
I think, well, yeah. So a couple different years because one had a lot of LaMelo and one really didn't. The thing that jumped out to me is that he actually was a positive defender this year and made a massive leap. Some of that's got to be context, but like he was an 8th percentile defensive estimated plus minus as a rookie to 62nd as a sophomore. Now, Charlotte has been kind of a mess all year, but like I don't really have a lot of questions about Miller being, at the very least, a dangerous high volume 3-point shooter that develops into someone who can also, punish smaller, like DeAndre Hunter style, like punish smaller matchups, getting to, easy twos type of thing. So the fact that the defense is coming along, I mean, again, smallish sample because he missed more than half the year. That's pretty encouraging to me. So where are you on him on either offense or defense?
So defense, I'm stock neutral because I thought he was a really good defender last year too. And just as someone who can play, I mean, I know, what is he, 6'9", but like the plays that he can make around the basket as well. And then you look at his ball denial and his ability to like guard up and down the positional spectrum. I'm just stock neutral because I don't have questions about his defense. And I will say that compared to what we thought about him coming out of college, I am higher on his offense overall, but I don't know, like, what is the wheelhouse outside of, okay, he's going to shoot a high volume of catch and shoot threes. And I find myself last year, maybe because there was so, like, they needed to experiment, so my baseline was so low, was, all right, look at the self-created shots he's making when he gets to his spots in the middle of the floor. Look at kind of the things he was doing as a passer. I just wonder, like, okay, well, can that be scaled up? And I don't think we got, and I mean, the sample size was so low this year, so I think it would be unfair to him to go stock down. But this is someone who I was hoping that, okay, if you're going to play more time with LaMelo, will your rim pressure go up? It didn't. They didn't really have him moving off the ball a ton either. Are we going to see someone who can draw an appreciable number more of shooting fouls when he's on the ball? He is not. So again, you can kind of look at the beginning of next year will be an extension of his sophomore season. I'm stock neutral though, because I think I would have confidently said at the end of last year, this is an all NBA caliber prospect. I still believe that, but I think it'd be easier to sell me on, oh, well, this is really more all-star quality than all NBA quality.
Yeah. I think the LaMelo of it all is complicating things. Cause like Miller's assist to turnover is like 4-3 this year, which is just like, so it's like, well, then he can't, and it was similarly bad last year, but it's like, he's not, as long as LaMelo's there, he's not going to be asked to be anything more than a secondary facilitator because LaMelo is going to be on the ball a ton. And the fact that he took a lot of threes last year, Miller did, and he took even more this year to the point that more than half his shots have been threes. I hope that he doesn't get pigeonholed as like being primarily just a catch and shoot guy. Cause I do think, so I'll go stock neutral for similar reasons, but I am a little concerned that like the context of the team is making it hard to know whether he's like, really being used right or has a lot of chance for upside.
So maybe this might be the best way to put it, is that last year I would have been confident that, okay, independent of LaMelo, when you're looking for, okay, who's the guy that will drive the offense without LaMelo on the floor, I felt better about it being him last year than this season.
I agree with that.
And I've seen some of this, that because of LaMelo, and I think Mort has even alluded to this when he's been on the podcast, LaMelo Ball is not infringing upon Brandon Miller's development or anyone else's. And like Brandon Miller's efficiency this year is night and day with LaMelo on versus LaMelo off. And so that this isn't at more specifically, I'm exhausted by the narrative surrounding like just LaMelo Ball. There's real issues to quibble about. I just feel like we focus on the wrong things collectively. Who do we have next, Grant?
Oh man, things have changed for this guy, Dereck Lively II. I mean, how many centers, young centers were we higher on after last year? Like personally, not a whole lot. I think like, unfortunately, our evaluation of him has to depend on like somebody else basically. Cause like, what is he without Luka or without that type of facilitator? I don't know. We haven't seen it cause he was hurt when Luka got traded.
I will say, I think he was just as good, if not better defensively. And we made a big deal when I remember we were doing last year, our rookie awards, or maybe it was a rookie stock report, his floor navigation away from the ball, even independent of having those screens. That stuff is all there.
Great
I just don't know. I'll be stock neutral on him because I'm not going to say we haven't seen him play without Luka yet. So I can't sit here and say he was so dependent on Luka, like his trajectory is fucked. And I think, by the way, the defensive trajectory is just still like, this is, you had him on an all defense team during our first quarter awards. Like that is still, I don't know if he's defensive player of the year material, but like the fact that he could be one of the 10 most valuable defenders, if that's his trajectory, that's huge. So I'll go stock neutral. We haven't seen the sample. We haven't seen a large enough sample size in general, but we have absolutely zero sample size of what does he look like on a team that just doesn't have Doncic at all.
Yeah, I think you have to go neutral. We saw it. Like he was the defensive anchor on a finals team. So like, the box checked, like that's it. He's there's no reason that Luka being there or not being there will affect that. Now the question next year that I think I'll be focused on is like, is he a lob catcher? And when the lobs aren't there, he's got no offensive value, or can he become like a great screener? Can he become like, are there other ways? Is there like a Jaren Jackson flip push shot arsenal that he can work on, like that kind of thing? But yeah, it's got to be neutral for now because there's too much unknown.
Yeah, I mean, the Anthony Davis of it all, too, is like, well, what does he look like working with maybe arguably you could say two bigs with Anthony Davis and PJ Washington on the floor?
Yeah, right.
I will say, because I mentioned the floor navigation before, I am confident that they could figure out how to make it work, but I don't is this a team? Will they get creative and run dual big pick and rolls? Like Anthony Davis, like I don't know, but we'll have to see. Super quick hitter portion of the podcast. Julian Strawther with the Denver Nuggets. To be fair, can you really go stock down when he's actually playing now?
I mean, you could, because we've seen more. I just don't. I used it on the Gradey Dick analysis, but like, I just think he needs to be an elite shooter to matter. And he's like been good enough, but there's like nothing in the advanced metrics to recommend him. He's like a deeply damaging overall player by like EPM and a lot of the other catch-alls. I just don't know. I don't know what he does that's going to be super helpful or justify him playing big minutes on a team that has actually other options, unless he's shooting 40%. Like, right. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't know if that's any different than last year though.
I feel a little bit stock up on him because I have questions. Like the volume of shooting is going to be there. We'll go in it. What is he at? 36% from three since January 1st. Will that go in? But there's been a few more layers to his game where it's like as a driver, that I've been a little bit more intrigued by is someone like moving away off the ball. I thought he's been a little bit better. And so like that, I'm going to go slightly stock up, even like kind of handling the NBA physicality in certain instances. I'm going to go a slight stock up, but that's not an easy one for me.
I mean, I guess he is actually making more shots and playing more. Like I'll go stock up, but I guess you said it at the start. It's just like, it was so bad last year. Where was there to go?
Ben Sheppard, Grant, stock up or stock down?
How come for the two Pacers we've talked about, I have to say like, what is a Jarace Walker? What is a Ben Sheppard? I think like kind of a ho-hum, like slightly above league average 3-point shooter that I think his defense is the carrying skill and he can be like an eighth guy, which is sort of what he is when the Pacers are whole. I kind of felt that way last year. So I'm leaning neutral on him.
Yeah, I'm stock way up.
Okay.
as a defender, like the types of assignments he shouldered in his minutes, huge, and a better 3-point shooter than I would have expected. And we talked about him, I think, was coming out of summer league, like the defensive grit and that being able to translate. And the fact that it has against, like, I would say outsized assignments, especially when the Pacers were really banged up on the perimeter. Remember, they were dealing with injuries to Naismith and Nembhard at one point. If you think, and you said it, if you think he's going to be a slightly above average, like 3-point shooter relative to the league, my stock is way up for him. I mean, when it comes to the mustache now, stock down, maybe demerit him for that.
I was just going to say, I think it's the mustache that's like throwing me. It's like, God, we said this exact same time.
Now he looks perpetually dubious with the mustache.
I don't trust him.
Who we got coming up here next?
Ooh. Man, Jaime Jaquez. What was he? He was like top 6th in rookie of the year and like top 10 in 6-man last year, and found himself out of the rotation for a chunk. I think the Jovic injury should get him more chances. Broken record, it's the shooting. Under 30% from 3 this year. It was only like 32 last year, I think. That's offset by like though he's playing less, free throw rates up, more rebounds, assists, and steals per minute. So that's illustrative of like, he came in billed as like he's going to do everything on the margins to help you win. So he's delivered on that, but it's just the shooting looks like a real problem. I think he's been better of late. I don't have the splits in front of me, but if he, again, we keep coming back to this now because we're talking about role players. He needs to be close to league average as a 3-point shooter, I think. Or, at least in the like low 30s, like 31, 32, 33.
On real volume, though, because he had 34.2% since January 1st, but it's on fewer than 2 attempts per game, and that's just not.
Yeah. No, I think he just the do it all game. One of the components of do it all needs to be make like a decent number of shots to where the defense cares about you.
I have more questions of him overall as plug and play offensively than I did before.
Right.
And that was like sort of so it's like even independent of the 3-point shooting, if you need him to have the ball in his hands or he has to punish a mismatch in the post, there's value in that. But like, is he a good enough defender to say like, oh, we need to do this? And how old is he now? So he's at like, what would be the upside? So he's 24. This is age 24 season. What type of upside are you tapping into there? I'm stocked down. Could still be a very good player, but we were pretty adamant, or at least I was pretty adamant, like when we were talking about like, oh no, like this someone's gonna be really good. He's gonna be like connective at both ends of the floor, and he's gonna contribute at a high level to a winner. And I've kind of like that script for me. I'm questioning almost everything I thought about him last year.
Yeah, I mean, you count on him not getting a whole lot better because of the age. Like that's what the draft profile. Oh, he's gonna help you win now, but like this is what he is. You don't count on that guy getting worse as a sophomore, which is what's happened. So it's got to be stocked down.
Do you give him any grace because of what happened to the Heat, like for the first
half? A little bit. So I think he could get back to last year's shooting, and then maybe you're talking about another. Yeah, he's back in like, oh, he's a really good 6th, 7th guy, but that's where we were last year. So he's below that at the moment. I don't think he can be better than he was as a rookie, like in a significant way.
Look, the fact that I'm wondering if Haywood Highsmith is more valuable to the Heat at this point, I feel like that's slightly problematic. So yeah. I'll go stock down here for him though. Any real snubs that you think that we should have been talking about?
Anthony Black stock down because he can't shoot, but we kind of maybe stock neutral because we knew that already. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't feel any guilt for not talking about Guy Santos a little bit, or
we got another hour 40. Should we go?
Speaking of stock up, the Guy Santos podcast begins right now. Are you ready to take us out of here?
Yeah, thanks. That's going to do it. Remember, as always, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening to this. If you're watching it on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about Ben Sheppard's mustache and how it affects his stock report. Did we weigh it too heavily? Not heavily enough. Who's to say? Join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. We were kicking around some guest player stuff, maybe making a return in some form. That would be a great place to keep abreast of that. What else? Yeah, I think that's going to do it. Close with shouts to Frank Ntilikina. Apologies to Jared Allen.